And the final thing that the FBI did that they're not actually getting, weirdly enough, any credit for, but they turned in their own guy, James Comey. That's important to point that out. You know, the law enforcement typically has a history of sticking together. And James Comey was one of the FBI's own. He was the former director of the FBI, and he did insidious work for the Democrat Party. We all know it. Now he's officially been indicted. And of course, the liberal media is shocked about this.
Virginia has heard the evidence, and at least a majority of those grand jurors have found that there is at least probable cause. So that's not enough to sustain a conviction, but that is enough to issue the indictment, and that's where we are right now.
What do you make of the charges, the false statements and the obstruction of justice? Do you expect that the false statements are allegations that he did not testify truthfully before Congress?
Based on the reporting, that would be my expectation. What I'm really interested to see is the obstruction just the false statements sort of characterized in another way, or is the obstruction something different? So in other words, you can charge someone as a prosecutor with false statements, and then you can pile on an obstruction charge, basically on the theory that by testifying falsely, you impeded an investigation, you obstructed justice. So I want to see, are they essentially redundant, or is there something different to the obstruction? I don't want to speculate, but there's all sorts of other conduct beyond false statements that could satisfy an obstruction charge. So that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for as soon as we get this indictment in hand.
Now, I waited to cover this story of James Comey being indicted. I knew it was coming. I could have covered the story even before it happened because I have great sources that were basically alerting me to the fact that it was going to happen, and I knew it. I just wanted to wait because there's a lot of details that go into something like this happening. There's a lot of moments that occur that are more worth reporting on after they happen rather than before, where you only have speculation to go off of. And I also had a couple of questions of my own. Mainly, what took so long? I originally even told myself that if Trump's Department of Justice didn't make prominent arrests by the end of August, that I was going to be outraged. And truthfully, I was. August came and went with basically crickets. September has basically come and went with basically crickets up until now. And it turns out this face right here was one of the main holdups. This is Eric Siebert. And you can see here, earlier this month, Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney leading the probe into James Comey, abruptly resigned just hours after Trump called for him to be removed. Why did this happen? Siebert had reportedly told Trump's DOJ that there wasn't enough evidence to charge James Comey and also raised concerns about a potential case against him. Trump has long viewed Comey as a political enemy. Trump disputed Siebert's resignation, insisting late that night on Truth Social that he didn't quit. Instead, I fired him. All of this happened while his own Department of Justice appointees and key Republicans argued to keep the veteran prosecutor, to keep Siebert around. Now you can see here from this page, Real Political Data. This is more information I found being reported on by this page about Eric Siebert. He states, the Eric Siebert saga proves why the biggest issue with the Trump administration is Pam Bondi. Eric Siebert was purposefully waiting out the statute of limitations so he couldn't charge people like Comey. He was also referring to act against people like Bolton. Also, Pam Bondi viciously defended him, claiming he was doing the best he can and all of that nonsense. Trump forced Eric Siebert out. Suddenly, Comey, Letitia James, John Bolton, and others are about to be charged. Funny how that works. Yes, it is very funny how that works. And you want to know something else about this Eric Siebert guy? The plot thickens even more than just Pam Bondi defending him, even more than just assuming that he was waiting out the deadline for the statute of limitations so that they couldn't indict Comey. Because here's more information that I found about Eric Siebert right here.
So the U.S. attorney who was fired by Donald Trump in the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, prepared a 51-page memo arguing that former FBI Director James Comey should not be indicted for lying to Congress under oath. What he didn't include in his memo is the fact that Siebert has a stunning conflict of interest. You see, his father-in-law, the father of his wife, is the godfather to James Comey's daughter. You can't make this stuff up.
As time continues to go on, when it comes to the Department of Justice and the FBI, you come to find that it seems like there's like a crime family that had infiltrated our justice system. James Comey's daughter was involved in the Department of Justice. She resigned back in July. Now this with Eric Siebert. And I'm going to cover another person in Comey's family in just a couple minutes here who also is having a problem with all this, who also works in the Department of Justice. It's absolutely crazy, and it explains so perfectly why justice on behalf of the American people has not been served correctly for the better half of a decade or more. And you know, the whole thing is, this was my biggest gripe with President Trump in his first term. He was too soft on political corruption, crimes, and pursuing justice. And he paid for it when he was voted out in 2020 and then relentlessly persecuted by his own political rivals from 2021 all the way through 2023. We saw that. They didn't show him any mercy. And that typical soft, old school conservative fear of playing with a gentle hand and throwing softballs rather than hardballs, so that way, when you're not in power and the Democrats are, they'll go easy on you too. That whole theory was shattered when we saw them viciously pursue not only the former president of the United States, who stood for the people, President Trump, but also pursued members of his cabinet and of his Department of Justice, etc., relentlessly, throwing some of them in jail. They showed no mercy. And of course, now that the tables are turned and Trump learned his lesson, now they want to cry and scream about it. But the problem remains the same, in all honesty, and very unfortunately. Now Trump is out for justice. He does want that. But unfortunately, in my opinion, I think he's appointed, once again, wrong people. He's working overall with definitely a much better cabinet. I like people like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, etc. But Pam Bondi, she's a no. And I have not liked her from the beginning. I've been vocal about her on this channel since probably around March or April, back when I created this channel. I just never liked her. And I'm being proven more and more correct on that stance as time goes on. I could tell she was soft. And the best case scenario for someone like Pam Bondi is that she is lazy and incompetent. And the worst case scenario is not even something I want to say at this point in time. To replace Eric Siebert, you can see in this photo here, in the middle, standing next to Pam Bondi, Lindsay Halligan was sworn in as the interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. And within 3 days of this change happening, like the other posts were stating, Comey was indicted. I wonder why that happened. Why was Pam Bondi so viciously defending Eric Siebert? Why did months and months go by with no major arrests, no major indictments, Comey's statute of limitations for this indictment nearly passing us by, all under Pam Bondi's watch? Why did that happen? You can see here summarized well in this tweet. Pam Bondi had 10 months to indict Democrat criminals for targeting Trump. Bondi's record, 0 indictments and 0 arrests. Lindsay Halligan had 3 days in the job, and she's indicting disgraced FBI Director James Comey. Bondi is the problem. And, you know, to even enhance that narrative right there, President Donald Trump did put out a very telling Truth Social post after Comey was indicted, where he states, "I'd like to thank Kash Patel and the outstanding members of the FBI for their brilliant work on the recent indictment of the worst FBI director in history of our country, James Dirty Cop Comey. He's a dirty one. The level of enthusiasm by the FBI was incredible, but only caused by the fact that they knew Comey for what he is and was, a total slimeball." Again, thank you to the FBI and specifically those that worked on this case with U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan and the DOJ. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. President DJT. Do you notice who he didn't thank there? He mentioned Kash Patel by name and Lindsay Halligan, the newly appointed U.S. Attorney in Virginia. He did not mention Attorney General Pam Bondi. And there's been other tweets now in the past, I didn't report on them, where he called her out directly and called for the arrests pretty much straight up of people like Comey and Letitia James and others. I have a theory right now that Pam Bondi is actually finally on thin ice when it comes to where she stands with President Trump. He might finally be seeing her as an actual issue. And he might actually realize this term that he can no longer afford to take that soft stance position when it comes to pursuing justice against the corruption of the Democrat Party. And watching what Pam Bondi has done, which is basically associate herself with the FBI and tout off 4,000 plus arrests. That's great. That's expected, though. Every FBI and Department of Justice does that throughout every president's term. They arrest thousands of people, criminals, violent criminals, murderers, drug dealers, etc. It's great to see those numbers, but it's expected. It's not some sort of incredible accomplishment that the American people were really hoping for out of Pam Bondi. We expect those numbers. We want the big names. We know that there's a problem. We know there's a swamp, as President Donald Trump would call it, in our government. And it's still there, mind you. It is still there, and it needs to be dealt with this term. These next 3.5 years, we need to drain that swamp for the safety and security of our nation. And if Pam Bondi is going to continue to be soft and incompetent, it's not going to get done. And you know, all it takes is shining a light where you see the cockroaches, and they all tend to scatter. But the fear of doing that, the fear of the implications, the fear of the consequences that could come later on down the line is what prevents the conservatives from doing it. Look what happens, though. Lindsey Halligan appointed 3 days ago, like I said, Comey indicted. Look at the fallout from that happening. They weren't expecting this to happen. Look at, of course, MSNBC reporting on this like it's a bad thing, but take a listen to this report. The aftermath of Comey being indicted.
But they have shattered this norm, and many people who work in the Justice Department feel like they can no longer function there and are trying to leave. And same with the FBI. And they are worried about what comes next. They are worried about what they're leaving behind and who's doing those jobs now. But it's a very personal decision. They feel like there's no reason to stay, because if you stand up and try to fight against these things that are happening, you're going to have your head chopped off anyway. You'll be fired unceremoniously. And so, yes, almost everyone I talk to who has the ability to leave is trying to leave.
So Comey gets indicted, and people within the Department of Justice, the FBI, whatever, they're leaving now in protest. Good. Like I said, you shine the flashlight and all the cockroaches scatter. They're leaving. This is literally called draining the swamp. And all it took was for some people, not Bondi, to have the courage to act. Trump, combined with Kash Patel and Lindsey Halligan. They stepped up, they acted. They defied the fear and the precedent being set within their own departments about how this can't be done. You can't indict Comey. There's not enough there. They defied that. And look what's happening. The trash is now taking itself out. That is why it's important for conservatives to be doing this and to be pursuing this tenfold. Don't just stop with Comey. And I know this is to get the ball rolling. Trump has even stated as much. Comey was on the mid-tier when it comes to his offenses. There are much bigger names with higher offenses, and I think they're using Comey to build momentum towards that. I hope that's what they're doing, at least. And as they do that, more and more filth will purge itself from our systems. More and more cockroaches will crawl away desperately from the shining light of impending justice. And remember what I said about how there seems to be a crime family within these institutions? Well, guess who was one of the big ones to resign after Comey was indicted? Troy A. Edwards Jr., Deputy Chief National Security Section, U.S. Attorney's Office, EDVA, addressed September 25th, 2025 to Lindsey Halligan, United States Attorney, U.S. Attorney's Office. Dear Miss Halligan, to uphold my oath to the Constitution and country, I hereby resign as an Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia in the Department of Justice, effective immediately. Now, who's this resignation letter from? Well, that is from James Comey's son-in-law, who was a January 6th prosecutor, mind you. Isn't that interesting? Comey had his daughter involved, his son-in-law involved. We have the reports on that other guy who was holding up everybody. Pam Bondi was vouching for him for some reason. Turns out he has connections with the Comey family. They're all gone now. Maybe now that they're all gone, justice can finally prevail. That is, of course, if Pam Bondi is willing to allow it to prevail. You see, this meme might unfortunately be all too true. And for some reason, President Donald Trump has decided to have her back thus far. And though some of his more recent social media posts suggest that there might finally be some internal struggles happening there, some doubts on his end about her competency, him not even giving her credit for Comey's indictment because she truthfully doesn't deserve it, I'm afraid she's named quite appropriately compared to the cooking spray there, Pam. Nothing sticks when you use Pam. We'll see what happens, though. The pressure's on once again. And she's been nothing but a letdown to the American public so far with the Epstein file debacle, talking about how hate speech should be prosecuted. Everything she has done has been a disaster to the image of the Trump administration and a disaster when it comes to public relations, because even Trump's own supporters don't like her. But if there's anybody who deserves this justice coming his way, it is certainly James Comey. And I'll tell you right now, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more reporting and content like this, unless, of course, you think James Comey is an American hero and you pray for him to beat this while listening to Bruce Springsteen and worshiping your Obama poster in your room. If that's you, oh my God, please dislike this video and get off this channel. This channel is not for you. This channel is for American patriots who want justice and want America to be safe and secure going forward. I'll leave you guys with Stephen Miller, the man that Gavin Newsom continues to call fascist, his thoughts on James Comey. Stephen Miller is a savage. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Give this video a like and comment down below.
It truly is one of the most heinous things that has ever happened in the history of our country, what James Comey did to our democracy. I can't think of anybody in modern history who has done more to sabotage and attack our constitutional republic than James Comey, beginning with the Russia hoax in 2016, as you said, the dirty dossier. James Comey, as the head of the FBI, tried to lay a trap to remove a duly elected president from office, to imprison and incarcerate his political allies and friends, and to lead an actual coup against the laws and Constitution of the United States. What James Comey did is truly one of the most severe assaults on our freedoms and liberties that has occurred in the whole history of this nation.